We have Brian, Sarah, and Rob joining the call. Unless I hear otherwise from the outdoor economy folks, why don't we have all those folks turn on their cameras and we'll move into our next session here. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me.
And Brian, are you there?
A little light up here.
Yep, I'm here. How's it going?
Hey, Brian. Nice seeing you.
Good seeing you.
So Teresa has requested that I facilitate this session so that she can sit on the side and offer insight or perspectives or push back as she sees fit. This is a great opportunity.
Actually, just to grade them on their responses.
Active grading.
That's why.
Perfect. You can just do a thumbs up, side thumb, thumbs down. So this is a great opportunity to talk to three folks who are at the helm of major companies in the outdoor industry who not only have to balance the challenges of being a sustainable company in general and during this pandemic, but also have put serious weight behind efforts of diversity, equity, inclusion within their organizations. And so what we're hoping for over this next hour or so, and during this conversation, and the audience, please feel free to submit questions. We're hoping for some inside look at what it means to be at the top level of a company that is making efforts to improve on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and what that looks like in practice. I think my only request here is that as a group, we're okay with raggedness, knowing that some of our ideas might not be totally fully formed or might not sound quite right. But that's sort of like part of the process. And we recognize that all of us are in a stage of growth, and what's most important is putting one foot forward and starting the effort. So I want to pass it over to our three panelists to introduce themselves. I'm hoping you can just say your name, the organization you're a part of, what you do for that organization, and also what your organization does. So Sarah, why don't you kick us off?
Awesome. Well, hi, you guys. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me as part of this panel. It's such an important topic. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Backcountry, where I get to lead marketing for Backcountry and our portfolio of brands. Our brands provide customers with the highest quality performance outdoor gear and apparel, while also delivering unmatched product expertise and personal outfitting and service through our cornerstone program called the Gearheads.
And Sarah, where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from Park City, Utah.
Very cool. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Rob, I see that you're not wearing a suit and tie per usual, but we're excited to have you.
I thought you told me not to
introduce yourself? You know, it must have just been missed channels. I'm sorry about that, Rob.
Sorry.
But hey, would you introduce yourself? You look great.
Thank you. Everybody looks great here as well. My name is Rob Coughlin. I'm a partner and GM at Granite Gear. We're a 34-year-old company based in northern Minnesota. We specialize in ultralight hiking packs and hiking accessories, as well as portage pack, canoe accessories, and some travel gear. I'm currently sitting in Libertyville, Illinois. It's the native travel lands of the Kickapoo, the Peoria, the Miami, and the Potawatomi. Also home to Tom Morello, guitarist for Rigid. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a board member for Warrior Expeditions, which helps returning combat veterans transition back into civilian life through hiking, paddling, cycling. Last but not least, I hold a weekly event on our Instagram, Granite Gear's Instagram page called A Hot Minute. We highlight underrepresented people, communities, organizations within the outdoor world, and we create a safe space to have these important conversations. Again, just incredibly honored and grateful to be part of this conversation.
Thanks so much, Rob. And I got to give you a shout out. I got married a little over a month ago, about 6 weeks ago, and Rob reached out and provided my wife a new backpacking backpack, and we shared our first backpacking trip together over our honeymoon down in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado.
Oh, amazing.
So thanks so much, Rob.
You're welcome.
Suck up, Rob.
Hey, I know how to do it.
Brian.
Yeah, cool. I'm Brian Heifferon, the CEO and co-founder of the Outbound Collective, coming to you from beautiful but unfortunately smoldering Northern California, up in the Bay Area, and I'm on the ancestral land of the Coast Miwok. If you haven't heard of the Outbound Collective, we're a community-driven outdoor media platform. Every year, about 15 million people rely on us to find the best outdoor adventures, places to stay, and guided experiences to take. Our goal as a company is to build a better, more inclusive home for the modern outdoors, one where everyone feels welcome and represented. And what we're really trying to do is we want to empower healthier, happier lives through the pursuit of everyday adventures.
Wonderful, Brian. And a shout out to Brian as well, who is just like a quiet but active contributor behind the scenes to the work we do on the Pledge. He often picks up the slack, which is especially great for me as I'm in grad school. For the first question, over the past 6 months, I think every person in the United States has had to do some soul searching or reckoning on their relationship to racial injustice in society or systems of oppression in general. And in doing so for the three of you, I'm sure you've also reflected on the intersection of your own companies with that work as well. So I'm hoping that the three of you can speak on just why this work feels important and necessary for your company. And we'll go in the same order. Let's start with Sarah.
Yeah, first of all, I loved what Teresa said before we joined in this official conversation, where she mentioned that there's no perfect way to approach this work. And so I think that's a really important point to elevate in this question or around this topic in general. The way that we see it and the way that I see it is that Mother Nature doesn't discriminate based on color of your skin, gender, ability, socioeconomic status. Everybody should be equal in the outdoors because of that. The outdoors serve so much value, and we all know that as we get to experience it. And I think even more so today, with all of this chaos around us, the therapy that I know the outdoors provides me when I get to spend time in the outdoors is incredibly valuable. It's no secret that the BIPOC community is underrepresented in the outdoors. So we all have work to do to improve awareness, access, and overall sense of belonging for these underserved communities. We have to acknowledge that. And that being said, I feel really strongly that to enact any meaningful change for diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we have to start from within our own organization. And Teresa has been such an incredible support as Backcountry's been on this journey to try to understand what our best path forward is in doing that. We know from a business standpoint that the best strategies and plans involve input from different backgrounds and perspectives. So we want to ensure that our doors are wide open for different backgrounds, for different perspectives, and that we are actively seeking this information and this conversation and this education, striving to be more welcoming to all in both our business and the outdoor community.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think what I appreciate about that response is an identification of both the sort of intrinsic reasons for doing this, because it's the right thing to do, because communities should feel safe and that they belong and be part of society, but also the extrinsic motivators for just being a sustainable business in the long term.
Right.
Diversity is incredibly important to well-functioning teams, and it sounds like that's something that Backcountry is
absolutely. I mean, if you put yourself around a table of the same individual that you represent in your body, you're going to get a very one-note view. You're going to get a one-note output. We have an incredibly diverse generation sitting in front of us. We should all aspire to be as diverse as that generation. And so I think it takes action, collective action.
Wonderful. Rob, tell us why this work is so important to what you do at Granite here.
There's so many answers to that. First and foremost, it's just personal. My anger, my empathy, my feeling of helplessness on what's going on with people who don't look like me, it weighs on me. It weighs on me a lot. It's weighed on me for a long time. In the last several years, we at Granite Gear, especially on the ambassador side and our groundskeeper programs, have really made a strong effort to increase diversity within our ambassador program. And what we found when we started this 5 years ago, and we would have 300 people apply for 20 positions of being a Granite Gear groundskeeper, it was difficult to find people of color. They were just not applying. We had to actively search them out to include them on our next year. And that was kind of eye-opening. Earlier this year, when the pandemic hit, I guess it was about March, we started the Hot Minute with the goal of just getting BIPOC voices heard, hear the stories, let people understand, because you look at our demos on our social media sites, it's like everybody out there in the outdoor industry, it's incredibly male, it's incredibly white. What we've done is tried to make people like me understand what it is for people like Teresa to just go on a hike, to just drive through public land sometimes. The stories are endless of people I talk to on really almost a daily basis, be it people of color or other underrepresented people in the outdoor industry. It is something that is just as important for us, me, David, Rhonda, our ownership at this point, as making kick-ass long-distance hiking packs. And I'm going to tell you, number one, I appreciate you, Backcountry. You are a great partner, and we love you. But one other thing we talk about when it comes to serving underrepresented people, we can give away all the product we want. We're not going to make a dent in that. So with Granite Gear, our number one pack is called the Crown. And you probably know that at Backcountry because you have a lot of them we just shipped you. But, so sell those. But, sorry, I lost my place there. That pack retails at $200. Now, that is a lot of money. But this pack, you can hike for 3,000 miles with. So price inclusivity has something we have to be aware of as outdoor manufacturers. We want to keep making the best product, obviously. But there's a certain point where we just outprice our consumers out there. And I think, and we're going through the development of the next Crown. And my goal to my design and development people was, first and foremost, we need to keep that $200 price point. And again, it's part of our inclusivity program. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I'm going to stop now.
Well, something I was thinking about there, Rob, that note on price inclusivity is quite important and one that I see frequently in discussions of how to improve on the exclusivity in the outdoors. I've noticed Granite Gear just kind of skipping a step altogether and just giving people packs. And I'm wondering if you can talk about like that strategy of your marketing team and why it's important just to give people gear to put them in the outdoors without thinking too hard. Am I right about that? Is that something
you're absolutely right about that? And we give away a lot of packs. This year alone, we've given away $45,000 in packs, which may not sound a lot, but when you're a company the size of us, we have less than 30 employees. We don't even do 10 million. It's a lot of packs to give away. We do this to certain organizations and people out there who are doing the right work. We're not just giving them away willy-nilly. We're giving them away to people who are providing these packs in return to people who can't afford them. We say the outdoors is inclusive, but hiking, paddling, cycling, they're not inclusive. It's something that costs a lot of money, and a lot of people, especially from urban areas, just don't have the ability to do that. So why the outdoors is for everybody. There's a price tag on that. So by giving away the packs, we obviously want to sell packs too. So Backcountry, we don't just give away all of our packs. We sell them too. Is to try to help people out there who we identify with as making a difference in these underrepresented communities, people and organizations, to help get some people out there. And, they see Granite Gear on somebody's back that, maybe looks like them. If that happens at the end of the day, we get more business out of it, so be it. We don't do it to get more business out of this. Trust me, because we don't get the return. We do it, not yet, and I think we're going to. We do it because we need to do it.
That's great, Rob. And I'll just put a pin in this topic maybe for later in the conversation. But I think a role of the community to contribute to is that for a long time, there's been this sort of like underlying idea of gear shaming. You don't have the newest pack. You don't have the greatest features. Oh, you don't have that new e-bike. Like, we can't hang. And I'm seeing those threads being eroded away, but it's a good reminder that the most important thing getting outdoors is that people feel supported and safe and that they can exist there too. And yeah, go ahead, Rob.
But it's a great point you're bringing up. And for all you people who know through hiking out there, you know what a shakedown is. Okay. The shakedown in hiking is somebody who, is more skilled than you and has been doing it a longer time, takes all of your gear in your pack and says, you don't need this. This is why you're carrying something so heavy, this, that. When I see that going on, and at first I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, when I first learned about, and because I have not been in the outdoor industry my entire career. I started in the luggage industry and I was in there until 2005. So really, I've been in this industry for 15 years. But when you see somebody doing that and like picking up their heavy Coleman stove or what it is and said, this is not going to work. Well, yeah, everybody would love to buy that MSR stove. They're fucking awesome, but they're expensive, right? So I don't know where I was going with this, but
well, it's such a luxury statement, right? To be able to say that you want the best, the newest, the always fresh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a position of luxury, and that's shaming somebody for that is completely wrong. And we talk about being welcoming and creating a sense of belonging and inclusivity and access, and that's just completely counter to it. So the more that we can acknowledge that, hopefully we're going to start to see a continued trend in changing that behavior.
Agreed.
Brian, I want to bring you in here. As an outdoor media company, you have a slightly different perspective on some of this. Tell us about why this work is important to what you do at Outbound.
Yeah, I think we do have a different perspective coming from kind of the media side. We definitely I think we focus more on the narrative component of all of these issues. I think it's personally relevant to me and my co-founder. We're both biracial. I'm Korean American. My mom's a Korean immigrant. Tyler is Japanese American. One of the reasons we started the Outbound was because like the narrative that was being pushed in the outdoors didn't really connect with us. It was either very utilitarian, which ended up coming off as very kind of like boring or soulless, or it was very intense, ultra fit, top of the mountain, frozen beard kind of thing. And, we're two half Asian kids that grew up in Southern California. We grew up at the beach, fishing, car camping. Those things didn't really connect with us. So what we wanted to try to do is figure out, like, can we create a more approachable, realistic connection with the outdoors? And can we shift that narrative? And I think over the course of the past few months, it's even given us an opportunity to step further back and say, what can we do as a media company to impact change? I think one of the things that's great about all of this is that it starts with self-reflection, like everyone else has been saying, and for us as a media company, I think there's a unique opportunity to remove some of the gatekeeping that goes on around the narrative, right? And so I think traditionally the outdoor narrative has been marginalizing and pushing to the periphery lots of underrepresented communities. And our goal moving forward is to center the conversation and the narrative around those communities, bring them into the community, tell their stories, share their perspectives, amplify their voices, because I think it's awesome that we're having these conversations in like industry settings and in blogs. But I think until it gets into the mainstream, I think it's going to be difficult. And I think that's a challenge we need to address is how we kind of make that leap into the mainstream and get these conversations out of silos, because there's a lot of really great work being done. And so that as a media company is where we're really kind of putting our focus.
Yeah, Brian, I remember Teresa telling me about you a couple years ago, and what she described in the Outbound was a real sincerity in the work, that it didn't seem strategic, but just very motivated by what's in your heart. And I'm hoping that we can transition to this next question, which is sort of two parts. What are things that you've been able to accomplish in this space of inclusivity in general, or specifically inclusivity for Black, Indigenous, and communities of color? And what are things you still know you need to work on? What are things that you're pushing the envelope on, but you haven't quite succeeded at? And for both, how do you know you're doing well, or how do you know you have work to do?
Yeah, that's I think a really great question. The work we've done is, the work you both are doing, I think with the pledge is like super helpful for the industry, and for all companies, even like a POC-owned company like our own, I think, because it provides accountability and a roadmap. And I think that's super helpful. And it provides support. Like a little over a year and a half ago, like what came out of our action plan for becoming a pledge signatory was our Everyone Outside campaign. And a part of that campaign was a series of films that were going to tell stories that challenge, I think, the traditional concepts of belonging in the outdoors. And one of the films we featured Teresa. We featured a whole bunch of like amazing stories. And I think that was like our first step, I think, thinking through how we can build a more welcoming and inclusive like narrative in the outdoors. But I'll say that we've definitely come to realize that, and this is where I think a lot of the real hard work comes, when you think of kind of this diversity specific component that's kind of a campaign or project you're working on, that's a lot different than saying, hey, we want to fully integrate those ideals, concepts into the business itself. And really right now, that's what we're working on doing. And I think taking those steps forward, instead of saying, hey, we've got this thing off to the side, which is this project or campaign, baking that into the fabric of the company, and everything we do and how it's represented and the groups we work with, the stories we tell, and how we engage at a grassroots level and kind of build this community in solidarity, I think that's where we need to do our hard work. And that's like a challenge, but that's where we're kind of focusing our energy.
I love what you said around it being an initiative. I always get a little peeved when I hear of these things as marketing campaigns. Yeah. It's so much more than that. It has to be ingrained in every dimension of your organization, and that's not easy work. This isn't easy. It's not easy for anyone. But just putting an external communication out there when it's not woven through the fabric of your business and your brand is a little short-sighted, to say the least.
So I want to get back to you in Backcountry in a moment, but I wanted to bring in Teresa for a moment, because Teresa was in this film that Brian described in terms of their outdoor media campaign. And Teresa, I was just hoping you'd talk about what it felt like to be on that project and what felt good about that work.
Yeah, what felt right about that project was that so many people said yes. When I, approached Save the Redwoods League about giving me that grove of redwoods to create a film, I didn't have a film crew in place. I didn't have anybody that had said, yes, we'll be in the film. I just had an idea. And that's how I do most everything I do, is I have a concept. And once that concept is in place, then I try to develop people around that. So I reached out to Brian and I said, hey, Brian, I have this idea. And when I shared with Brian the idea, Brian was like, whoa, we're already creating films around stuff like that. So Brian found the film crew. I didn't have a dime, to pay anyone to be part of this. Brian found the film crew. Save the Redwoods League said, we'll give you the grove. And then I started reaching out to the community saying, hey, I need your voice. And everyone said yes. So we came together, we made it happen. And the best part of it is that it was a grassroots effort. And I think all too often what stops us from following our passion is that we feel we need to have these huge, titles or people behind us. I have ideas, period. And I pursue those ideas. I chase them down. I go after people like Rob and say, Rob, give me $10,000. And Rob is like, here you go. So that's how it happens. And I was lucky enough to have Brian in support of the idea. We made it happen, and it was an amazing project. And the film is traveling around the country now in film fest, and various, conservation orgs are talking about it. So that was awesome.
Teresa, for folks who are unfamiliar with this film, could you just give a brief snapshot of it and where they might find it?
Yeah, it's called Here We Stand, and it's a film about a grove that's in Sonoma County. If you kidnapped me and told me that, we're only releasing you if you tell us where this grove is, I would just be held captive for the rest of my life, because I can't tell you how to get back there. But it was privately owned since forever. And the Save the Redwoods League was able to purchase it from the Richardson family, and it's being held right now. They have no idea when the release date to the public will be, but it's untouched. There aren't any utilities there. There aren't any restrooms there. There's nothing, but it's awesome. Redwood trees, just an open foresty area. And I felt at the time the importance behind sharing the film with the public was to show that we are here. We brought in the Native American tribes from the area. We were in conversation with them. But I wanted to show that people of color, we've been here, and these are our stories. And I wanted us to have the very first public access to this place, and be able to share our stories with the public. And that's what Brian made possible through himself and Wonder Camp.
Awesome. Sarah, I want to bring it back to the question that I asked Brian, which was, what are you doing at Backcountry that feels like progress, that excites you around this work of inclusion, and what work do you still have to do?
Yeah, so I've been at Backcountry for 3 months now, so I'm relatively new, and this has been one of the key areas of focus, and the momentum that has come as a result of that across the organization has been something I'm incredibly proud of on behalf of the team. We've built out a purposeful, inclusive initiative. This serves as our pathway to ensuring that diversity, equity, and inclusion are front and center at Backcountry. It starts, as I mentioned earlier, with us internally. This is internal education, communication, and ensuring that we're actively reaching out to more diverse pools of candidates, so that our internal employees and our internal community starts to become more diverse, and we bring more of those backgrounds into the fold, because that's incredibly important. Externally, we're focused on driving collective action. We're building more relationships with organizations and individuals that are committed to and have been committed to diversifying the outdoors, such as Black Folks Camp 2 with Earl, and the Outbound here with Brian, and the Everyone Outside initiative. These are organizations that have been spearheading DEI work, and our goal at Backcountry is partnering with them to help them further scale the good work that they're already doing, as well as to drive awareness and action against systemic racism in the outdoors. As to what we have left to be done, this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And I think the level of accomplishment will take quite some time that we all expect to see. I would say across all the issues related to racism in the outdoors, we have a lot to do as an industry, and we have a lot to do as a brand. We don't see that this work is anything that we'll ever be able to like check the box. We're done, moving on. This is an initiative that is definitely a long-term commitment. We're really just getting started in so many ways. We have ways of measuring success in this, and we need to be explicit about that. Employee surveys, customer sentiment. These are things that we're going to be able to measure to monitor progress ultimately. But I think that at the end of the day, when we look outwardly and can authentically feel as though society and the outdoors has progressed, then we're really going to know.
Thanks, Sarah. To that brings back to the 2 points I was talking about earlier that I learned from Whitney Tome at Diverse Green. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It seems like you all are taking strides to really do some critical analysis of the culture that exists at Backcountry and what it means for a group that's underrepresented.
Yeah.
And then you measure what you care about, and it sounds like you all are starting to put numbers to these things that maybe you've had less formal measurements of in the past, and now can kind of track your progress at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did an employee survey about a month and a half to 2 months ago related to this topic, and it was just mind-blowing to some degree, but also incredibly heartwarming and motivating to see that. I think every single question that we asked with regard to level of interest, level of appetite, level of willingness to get involved, the responses were like over 90% in almost every single area. So there's no shortage of understanding that this is really critical work, and no shortage of willingness to get your hands in there and roll up your sleeves.
Wonderful. Rob, bring us home. Tell us about what you're excited about, what you feel like you're really making progress on, and what work you have left to do.
Yeah, first, Sarah, I just want to say that people are noticing what Backcountry is doing right now. When I look at the retailers out there, nobody, and I mean this, nobody's doing it like you guys are doing. Especially for the last several months, it's been, it's just been such a breath of fresh air what your organization's doing. So let me start there. And what was the question here, Chris? Chris, was there a question, or am I just?
Yeah. What do you feel like you're doing well at Granite Gear? Where can you see some progress? And where do you still have work to do? And how do you know?
First off, to reiterate what Sarah said, the work is never done. We have so much more work to do. I think a ton of what we've accomplished is internally in our education. I was lucky enough to attend the diversity DEI training that both Teresa and Chris participated in, as well as CJ Golding. I was lucky enough to be part of that. I've taken some other DEI courses. Matter of fact, Chris, I took a course at Yale. It was free, online, 10 courses. And it was about Black history in America, from emancipation to the current years. And I thought I knew a lot, and I really realized I didn't know anything. I grew up in a very diverse area. I grew up in Miami, Florida. So I felt that made me not racist, right? I grew up with people who don't look like me. Thus, it's not true. When you take this work on you, you got to look at yourself first, because it exists in all of us, whether we like to hear that or not, as white people. And I know that fragility has a lot to do with that, but we have a long way to go in our own minds. And I'm saying the humankind. What do I feel we're doing right? I feel we're amplifying the right voices out there. Sometimes our events can go a little haywire, as yesterday, but I think at the end of the day, we're just trying to, again, amplify those voices out there as much as we can. When you look at a company, and again, we're a very small company, and I know I say that all the time, but we are. We're also a company where the vast majority of our employees live in northern Minnesota, in Two Harbors, Minnesota. And if you want to go to a diverse place, do not go to Two Harbors, Minnesota, because there's no diversity there. So we have to get diversity into our organization in other ways. And again, we're doing it through different ambassadorships, through the Hot Minute, but really just daily talking to people out there, whether it's me, whether it's Julie Bacon, our PR person, or, Rhonda, our sales and marketing person, or, we even get our design team involved. Everybody's involved in this initiative. Every single time we talk about something, diversity, equity, inclusion have to be a part of that. I love when Teresa says, this isn't just signing something. And then you're like, we're good. Let me stand on Teresa's shoulders and scream it to the world that we're part of the outdoor diversity pledge. That's not how it works. And that's not how that will ever. We understand this is work. It takes work every single day. It takes time. And we got a lot to learn. We got a lot to improve on. We got a lot more people to meet, and we got a lot more people to talk about and share their stories. That's where we're at.
Thanks so much, Rob. I want to open it up to the audience in a moment, but Teresa, I want to just pose a question to you before we do that. What is going to make it happen at scale across the industry? Clearly there are companies that have deemed it critical to lean into this work and are making some progress. But what is it going to take for companies of all stripes to say building inclusive outdoors is integral to our business success and integral to the future of our planet?
It's going to take the C-suites of all these companies to speak up. It's expected from people like me, people who look like me, to call out the industry, to call out systemic racism. But until white men and women step up and say this is a problem, things will not change. There's only so much we can do. There's only so much asking we can do. There's only so much protesting we can do. It's going to take people in positions of power to start sharing that power and sending out a message across the industry like Burton did when Burton said, we need to grow the fuck up. That's what will be needed. We need to have people making bold statements and doing bold ass work. It's not easy. It's hard as hell. But until this industry at large, including OIA, the Outdoor Industry Association, until they start walking the walk, things will not change. I am sensing that things are starting in that direction, but we need boldness. We need people to understand that we can't hold on to this power forever. There's a racial demographic shift happening in this country. People of color are part of that shift. And until we are part of the leadership, until we are part of the decision making, until we're sitting on boards, nothing will change drastically enough to meet the demands that are happening with the environment. This environment is what's at stake if we don't change. The fires that are taking place here across California, it's maddening how it's now the norm. Climate change is real. We need to vote assholes out, and we need to speak to the importance of understanding the impact that environmental shifting is happening. Climate change is happening. We need to speak to that with urgency, and we need to bring people of color to the table around those conversations.
Thank you, Teresa. Thoughts from the other three panelists before I move into some audience Q&A?
I mean, Teresa said it all, but collective action, acknowledgement that change is needed, and then demanding it through our actions as an industry, as a community, as a globe. Words have to be met with action. It starts with acknowledging it. It starts with building roadmaps to progress. Roadmaps are important for me because these are really big topics. They can be, if you look at them as a whole, it's scary. So you have to create steps. And as you start to take those steps, hopefully one day we can look back and see the mountains of progress.
I'd agree, I think, with all of that. I think I'm hopeful, I'm cautiously optimistic because I think there's more self-awareness within the industry generally now. I think we're seeing that. My kind of more skeptical, cynical take might be that we're working within a capitalist-like framework, right? And I think once companies and C-suites start seeing and really understanding that like the future growth of their business really does depend on embracing a much wider and more diverse set of consumers, employees, and leaders. I think until they see that, or once they see that and really embrace that, and that's an area of growth. And there's also a competitive advantage to be one of the first companies speaking to those communities. That's where I think you'll actually see people making changes and some of these barriers kind of being removed, because I agree with everything, especially what Teresa was saying. It's got to be a top-down push from the C-suite, and I think those folks are concerned about profit and growth. And so if you want to grow the outdoor industry, I think you need to grow who your consumer is, and you need to be welcoming, and you need to embrace everyone in the outdoors. So, hate to be cynical.
Rob, anything to add?
People at my company are going to kill me for saying this, but capitalism currently is not inclusive. However, besides our moral obligation, our empathy, our passion to be part of this, financially it makes sense. You can see the demographics in this country. You see how they're changing. If we ignore people of color in this industry, we are not going to last. That's a fact. So while you do have the systemic racism in the outdoor industry, I hope at the end of the day, the people who can make decisions like Teresa are talking about finally figure out that not only is this the right thing to do, morally, it's the right thing to do financially. And that's the key. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. I think we're seeing this context of a shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism as investors wake up to the value of companies that incorporate sustainability into their bottom line in every way. Employees are increasingly looking for companies that have clear statement of vision and values, and refusing to work at companies that have not made those commitments or are part of the status quo that's been part of extraction and exclusion. So we're on the right path, but I think you're on a good point, Brian, that in a capitalist system, people tend to be excluded, and in this case, in the outdoor industry, those who've been excluded have been predominantly Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, which is really true across all industries. One of the questions from the audience was that this conversation is focused a lot on inclusion from like a race or ethnic lens. I'd love to hear the three of you talk about efforts at your organizations for inclusion of other underrepresented communities. This could be LGBTQ, this could be differently abled communities, this could be folks of different socioeconomic status, different body types, whatever it might be, veterans. Talk about just like building a culture of inclusion that's, of course, helpful to Black, Indigenous, persons of color, but also to the greater community of underrepresented peoples in the outdoor industry.
I'll jump in there. The way that we talk about it at Backcountry, it's a book, right? And each of these represents chapters, each of the areas that you just referenced. And so we know that we need discrete efforts for inclusion across the board. There's no single solution that's going to help us impact progress across all of the various chapters that exist in this book. So we're trying to make some meaningful progress In areas like internally, we have a amazing women's leadership committee that really is in place to help empower the women within our company. We have relationships with the National Ability Center. So we are really trying to make progress with the similar framework that I referenced earlier as far as this internal and external approach. And I think, again, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We're never really going to be done, but I do think it is an important clarifying question, where inclusion is not just one thing. We're blessed with such an amazingly diverse world that represents so many different experiences and types of individuals. And so I think the notion of inclusion and belonging has to be taken into account with this very diverse set of differences.
I think, jump in, from our perspective, I think it's reflected in our outreach, I think, to affinity groups and nonprofits, right? So we'll be announcing some new initiatives, I think, later next week. But, our partners, we want to be inclusive of everyone in the outdoors, right? And so, like, we work with Paradox Sports and their adaptive athletes, the Venture Out Project, the LGBTQ plus community, Fat Girls Hiking. So that is super important, right? Because I think these are all marginalized communities that have been pushed to the periphery of the storytelling and I think the narrative of the outdoors. And I think, we want all of these communities to see themselves and gain a sense of belonging. And I think being able to provide a sense of belonging is kind of our core goal, right? And I think if you can do that, you kind of can move beyond the idea of having an audience, right? And kind of move into building and developing a community. And I think that's where you want to be, is building communities, not audiences. So.
Thanks. Anything to add on that, Rob?
Yeah. So I think either Sarah or Brian just mentioned it, but body diversity is something that we have really been keying on for the last 12 months, really 24 months as far as design and development goes. We have identified a segment in an unrepresented segment in the outdoor industry who can't get proper gear out there. We're launching a new line next year in 2021. You'll have it at Backcountry. We're addressing. This is what happens when you measure for a backpack in the outdoor industry. You go to your local REI, and what do? They measure your torso. They measure the length of your torso, and then they hand you a pack. I mean, is your height, does that say everything about you? Does that tell what kind of body you have? If there's someone who's 5'8" and weighs 150 versus 250, they're going to have different bodies. So we're making packs now that speak to that. Don't just speak to the length. They speak to the width of the shoulders. They speak to the width of your belt. We have our patented reef-up belt system that fits anything up to a 24 to a 42-inch belt waist size. As far as the LGBTQ community goes, we partner with TVOP on this. That's Perry Cohen and the Venture Out Project. Just talking about this new line, the permanent line we have coming out next year, our body liberating line. We've worked very closely with Jenny Brusso and the Unlikely Hikers, and it's been amazing what we've learned from them. Instead of getting that tall, skinny white guy to test out your pack and go walking for 3 months across the trail, to get people different. Because we have to be different. I
want to connect the dots on a couple of things there, Rob, too, that you said with regard to some of the earlier conversation around the importance of education and listening. Because what you said about your backpack example is perfect. When you think about servicing a customer's needs, they call up our gearhead organization. Our gearheads need to have that education, and they do, on diversity, on different body types, so that they can better service the customer and say, here's how you measure a pack. Here's how you find the right pack for your needs. And those needs are different from every individual out there. So educating our forces on the different types of needs our diverse customers have and hopefully more diverse customers will have, is such an important piece to all of this work.
Sarah, that actually brings up a good point. There are, in a company like Backcountry, I presume thousands of employees, or at least a lot. And you all can have these very intent, focused conversations at the executive level that maybe bring in outside consultants, have a real focus on embedding diversity, equity, inclusion in your organization. How do you bring it from the conference room and embed it throughout the organization, from top to that person who might be working the floor, meeting with customers firsthand, and actually being like the closest touch point to their experience with the company? You just talked about like building that culture of inclusion within the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with transparency. It starts with building a culture where good ideas come from everywhere, and having an open door sort of policy, because honestly, we learn so much from every layer within the organization. If our ears aren't open, that's a mistake. Shame on us, right? So I mentioned earlier about the employee survey that we did. The intent behind that was to really learn more from our entire community of employees around their appetite, the different chapters that I referenced around inclusion, what work would be most important for them to see and feel the impact on. So it's a bit of a layered cake approach, where we may need to be aligned at the top, absolutely first step. But the most important thing is, how can you transmit information from the top all the way across this broad group of employees? And I'll be honest with you, in a Zoom land like we're all living in right now, to some degree, it's somewhat easier. We're learning how information can transmit digitally faster, effectively. Bringing rooms of people together is still possible. And so I think it's important for organizations to be aligned at the top. I think it's important for organizations to have tools and information that can cascade across the organization. And we need to make sure that we have buy-in. If you're a people manager, you need to have buy-in on how important this work is and how it shows up in every single day, so that we can hold our teams accountable. We have no question about how important this is from a values perspective at Backcountry. No question whatsoever. Our compass is very strong. So when we see a misstep, we're able to hold people accountable because of that. So I think it's a combination of alignment and the right tools to ensure that the information can transmit across the entire organization, and very clear understanding of what good looks like and therefore what bad looks like.
Rob, I'd love to hear your response to that, because the conversation around justice, equity, diversity, inclusion probably looks different in northern Minnesota than it does in Park City or in the Bay Area. And you have your own values. You're at the top of the company, but there are people who are coming from very different backgrounds. Talk to us about connecting with those people where they're at.
Are you talking within my organization?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. When we, and I'm going to speak specifically about a hot minute, because that's really when we really put ourselves out there. It was really embraced by our entire organization. I'm not going to say the entire organization. There were a couple people in our offices, not at high levels, that didn't understand what we were doing. Why are you trying to speak to people of color? Listen, it's white people buying packs out there. And that undertook some education. Again, trying to make change within my organization is incredibly tough as far as hiring new people, at least in our Minnesota office, that are people of diversity, whether people of color, whether they're indigenous. It's very, very difficult in our small little 2,000 people town. Therefore, we need to do everything we can externally to show that while we may not have the employees, a diverse set of employees, that being said, we have 6 owners and 3 of them are people of color. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there real quick, but we realized that, and we are going to keep at it. We're going to keep trying to bring in more inclusivity into our company, but we have to do it externally and do as much as we can to build up communities, organizations, people of color out there in order to make a difference in this journey.
Brian, any thoughts on that at your organization?
I mean, if Rob's company is a tiny company, we're like a microscopic, minuscule company, you know. So for a company our size, honestly, it's about alignment on core values, principles, and then I think having conviction to follow through and follow the course we're setting. And so if you see us not moving, I think as quickly as we want and you would like, I think it's more a function of we're really like a tiny team and lack of bandwidth. But that said, like, we are accountable to ourselves and to our community. We don't have a boardroom. We're independently owned business. And so that's great. And so we have a direct connection with our community. So it's great that we get feedback and input consistently from our community. So they're not afraid of letting us know when they feel like we're not doing a good job, and we listen to them for sure.
Teresa, as you've been listening, I have a couple of questions for you to close out, but any thoughts in terms of what you've been hearing?
I think it's important that we give, you know, not only pledge signatories, but the industry time to do the work. It's not like this subject just came into being in 2020. This has been a conversation the industry has been having for years. But I think what's different in this moment is that people have had time through the pandemic to actually hear what we're saying and to understand that people are going to have to move around. People are going to have to share in that power. And I think people are finally getting that. They're having difficult ass conversations within their organization. People are being moved around. And I think we will continue to see that throughout the remainder of this year and into next year. Hopefully, we will be able to gather again. And my hope is that the Outdoor Retailer Show looks a hell of a lot different next year than it did last year. But I think people are hearing us. And my hope is that they continue to hear and act on what we're saying and bring us in so that we can continue to guide, not direct, but guide. But I think it's up to these individuals on this call, all the brands who have signed on to the pledge, and the outdoor industry as a whole. I think they're figuring it out. How do we move forward? How do we act? How do we show our commitment to this work in action and still have the room to make mistakes? So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I just hope as a collective, we can continue to encourage one another.
Teresa, that's a perfect transition into this last question from the audience. Well, there's two. Where can companies go for help in doing this work? And if a business or organization was inspired by the discussion and wants to take the pledge, what is their first step?
Up to Chris and see if he okays you.
Not so.
You know, Chris.
No.
I mean, you can go to the EndSolidarityProject.com. You can see all the pledge signatories and read up on the pledge. We don't want people just signing the pledge for the sake of signing the pledge. It's not easy. You know, we're not asking you just to sign the pledge and walk away. Do the freaking work. Don't sign the pledge. Do the freaking work. You know, the pledge is just a guide that anyone can look at and say, oh, we're capable of doing this. It's a guide. The pillars are a guide. They're a suggestion of where we can start or where you can start. Bring in your ambassadors. Bring in your CEO, your marketing department. Have a conversation on what you can do. I think all too often you guys have people at the ready that can help you do this work, but you never reach out to them. Bring everybody in, make everybody accountable for having a voice in this work. Yeah.
I'd also say as a brand within that community too, reach out to us. Like let's leverage each other too. If you see something that the Outbound's doing that you want to learn more about, I don't want to volunteer you, Brian, but I'm sure you'd be willing to talk to others about it. And I'm raising my hand as a representative of Backcountry to play the same role.
Yeah, and I would say, as somebody who kind of knows some of the stuff going on the In Solidarity website, there's an amazing community of DEI experts that you list in the community section of the site. Please, reach out to them, hire them, pay them for their work and their expertise. That's, Teresa, that's why you're bringing this whole group of people together. It's amazing. It's an amazing resource. So I'd encourage people to try to do that too.
Rob, any last words?
Bring it home, Rob. I have trust in you, Rob. Bring it home.
I'm bringing it on home right here. First off, Teresa, I didn't realize you've been doing this for 30 years. You don't even look old enough to be doing it for 30 years. When did you start? When you were 8 years old? Second of all, the work is never going to end, and just to reiterate what Teresa just said there about just signing the pledge, and I keep bringing up the hot minute because it's a lot of work we put into it. And it was last week, and David, he's our creative manager, said, why don't we just do this like once a month instead? And I went, Teresa was no, I went, dude, we committed to doing this every week. We stopped for 2 weeks after the murder of George Floyd, out of respect, but we have a commitment to do this every week. No matter how much the work is, no matter, sometimes it just feels like, oh man, is anybody listening to us? You commit to something and you keep doing it. One of my fears, and I've talked to so many companies in the last few months since the murder of Mr. Floyd, who have come to us and said, hey, we've seen you doing it out before, been doing it out for a while. How do we do this? You have a lot of smaller companies out there who are afraid to make that first step for fear of being called out. And I think that's something we need to get past as well. I'm not going to say the brand, but I have a very close friend who runs this brand. And after the murder of George Floyd, they decided to say something finally. And they got a lot of abuse from both sides, actually. And I think we need to overcome that as well. The people who want to join and are going to put forth the work, we have to accept that no matter what's happened for the past 10 years with them. There's a lot of people who just got it. Just in the last few months went, oh, we need to do our best as leaders in this, especially people like Teresa and Chris, of welcoming them if they're going to do the work. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, Rob, Sarah, Brian, and of course, Teresa, this has been such a pleasure to spend the last hour or so with you four. Now is an amazing time to transition this conversation from the private sector, where these folks work, into the public sector. There's been conversation. My city or state may not be able to take the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge, but what can I do? And so it's exciting to be able to pass it over to the team at the Outdoor Economy Conference, including Daquan Edmonds, who have been working on this very question for the last few weeks. And I'm excited for them to share what they've come up with. So I'm going to pass it to you, Daquan, and thanks again to all our speakers today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rob. Thanks,
Brian and
Thanks,
Sarah.
Brian. Thanks, Brian.
Thank
Thanks, Sarah. Behave, Rob.
I will. Be good, everybody.
Thanks.